I'm Aliza Matthews, currently 32 years old, and despite having dedicated over a decade to meticulously building a successful, demanding career in the high-stakes world of finance, I've always felt as though I was fundamentally inadequate in the eyes of one crucial person, my father. The annual family reunion dinner, an event usually met with a cocktail of obligation and apprehension, was looming on the horizon, and this year, the sense of dread was a palpable, icy knot in the pit of my stomach. In a desperate, almost pathetic attempt to bridge the seemingly uncrossable chasm between us, I had recently purchased him a brand new, top-of-the-line luxury car. It was an extravagant peace offering, a lavish, silent plea for approval, fueled by a naive hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this grand gesture would finally make a difference. Little did I know, tucked away deep within the recesses of my designer purse, lay a document that held the power to shatter the very foundations of my identity and reshape my entire world. By the time that long, emotionally charged night was over, I wouldn't just understand why my father never truly loved me. I would possess an undeniable, irrefutable truth that would forever alter my perception of my past, my family, and ultimately, myself. Before I plunge into the intricate details of my story, a narrative woven with threads of longing, rejection, and eventual revelation, I invite you to share in the comments below where you're watching from, and if you've ever found yourself in the painful position of having to stand up to someone, especially a parent or a figure of authority, who steadfastly refused to acknowledge or see your inherent worth. Someone who consistently dismissed your accomplishments and minimized your very being, then please hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me when I say, my journey through profound disappointment to a surprising form of liberation might just give you the courage, the clarity, or even just the quiet validation you need to confront your own battles. Growing up in the meticulously manicured, effortlessly affluent suburbs north of Boston, our family, the Matthews, presented an almost irritatingly perfect facade to the outside world. From the sprawling colonial estate with its immaculately kept gardens, to the carefully curated holiday photos that adorned our living room walls, everything screamed success, stability, and quintessential American prosperity. But behind the heavy oak doors, within the polished corridors of that seemingly flawless home, a different, far more complex and emotionally desolate reality played out. My father, Richard Matthews, was a man carved from ambition and an unyielding will. He had transformed his real estate development company from modest, almost humble beginnings into a sprawling, multi-million-dollar corporation, a testament to his relentless drive and singular focus. He worshipped success, revered social status, and demanded unwavering respect above all else, often to the detriment of genuine human connection, and certainly at the expense of authentic family relationships. He was not, from my earliest, hazy childhood memories, the kind of father who'd patiently attend school plays, enduring hours of amateur theatrics, or painstakingly help with bewildering homework assignments, his presence a comforting anchor. Instead, he was the perpetually harsh critic, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that could deflate any nascent sense of pride. He was the one who would point out that my A- grades should have been perfect A's, implying a fundamental lack of effort or innate brilliance. He was the one who would coolly question why I hadn't been chosen as team captain, suggesting a deficit in leadership qualities. And most devastatingly, he was the one who, with a chilling matter of factness, would remind me that second place was merely the first loser, a phrase that echoed in my mind for decades, coloring every competitive endeavor with a dark hue of inadequacy. My mother, Caroline, was in many ways his polar opposite, a delicate bloom of warmth and quiet affection, when my father's imposing presence wasn't casting its long shadow. She was the one who would offer a gentle hug after a scraped knee, who'd listen patiently to my childhood woes. her eyes soft with understanding. But the moment he entered a room, a subtle, almost imperceptible transformation would occur. She would become a different person entirely, almost physically shrinking into herself, her posture subtly caving, her voice softening to a near whisper. She would never, under any circumstances, contradict him, nor would she ever truly stand up for us children when his criticisms veered sharply from constructive into outright cruel and psychologically damaging territory. It was a bewildering dynamic that I, as a child, couldn't possibly fathom, this strange, almost hypnotic power he seemed to hold over her. I remember observing, with a child's intense curiosity, how her eyes would involuntarily dart towards him, a quick, almost fearful glance, before she dared to answer even the simplest questions, mundane inquiries about dinner plans or weekend activities. It was as if she needed his silent, unspoken permission to exist, to speak, to breathe. My siblings and I navigated the treacherous, often opaque waters of this complicated, emotionally volatile family structure, each of us finding our own way to cope, to survive, to seek some form of fleeting approval. My older brother, James, 3 years my senior, was undeniably the golden child. He possessed an effortless charm and an innate athleticism that seemed to align perfectly with our father's masculine ideals. He excelled at football, effortlessly made the honor roll, dated the right girls from the right families, their pedigrees as impeccable as their manners. Predictably, after graduating from our father's prestigious alma mater, he seamlessly followed Richard into the booming real estate business, a natural, preordained succession. Everything, or so it appeared to my envious, struggling younger self, seemed to come so easily to James. He seemed to intuitively grasp what would please our father, anticipating his moods and desires with uncanny precision, while I, in stark contrast, felt like I was constantly guessing wrong, perpetually misinterpreting the unspoken rules of engagement, stumbling over invisible hurdles. My younger sister, Sophia, 2 years my junior, somehow managed to navigate the murky, often perilous waters of our father's approval system, with a grace and subtlety that I could never quite master. She wasn't the driven overachiever that James was, nor did she possess my own stubborn, almost defiant academic prowess. Instead, Sophia had a natural, disarming charm, a gentle magnetism, and an almost supernatural ability to read the room, to intuitively know when to speak and, more importantly, when to fade quietly into the background. She became the family's unofficial peacemaker, the one who could occasionally coax a rare, genuine laugh from our father when his mood darkened into an oppressive storm cloud. She was also the one who, after particularly brutal criticism sessions directed at me, would quietly slip into my room, her eyes filled with a shared understanding, to assure me in hushed tones that it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Her presence a fleeting comfort in the echoing silence of my father's disapproval. But for me, Aliza, it seemed that nothing I ever achieved, no matter how significant or hard won, was ever quite enough. I graduated at the very top of my high school class, a feat of academic dedication, and secured a full academic scholarship to Cornell University, a prestigious achievement that should have been a source of immense paternal pride. Instead, my father aggressively pushed for me to attend his own alma mater, seeing my choice not as an independent accomplishment, but as a deliberate rejection of his legacy, a personal affront to his carefully constructed world. Throughout my demanding college years, I worked 2 part-time jobs, meticulously balancing my academic responsibilities with the need to fund my own independence, all while maintaining a near-perfect GPA. Yet, during every break, his relentless questioning would resume. Why aren't you interning at more prestigious companies, Aliza? Why aren't you leveraging my connections? After graduation, the predictable, half-hearted offer to work at his company came. I politely but firmly refused, knowing with a chilling certainty that I would never be truly seen for my own merits there, only as a pity hire or an extension of his own influence. Instead, driven by a fierce, almost desperate desire for true autonomy, I moved to the sprawling, vibrant, and utterly intimidating metropolis of New York City. I arrived with nothing more than 2 battered suitcases filled with my meager belongings and an unyielding, burning determination. I slept on a friend's lumpy couch, subsisting on ramen noodles, while sending out countless applications to every financial firm I could possibly find. When I finally landed an entry-level position at the formidable Goldman Sachs, his response, delivered with a casual, dismissive sneer, was, "Let's see if you even last a month." I did last. Not just a month, but 8 grueling, exhilarating, and deeply challenging years. I worked my way relentlessly up the corporate ladder, navigating the cutthroat world of Wall Street without a single family connection, without the shadow of nepotism, relying solely on my own grit, intelligence, and relentless work ethic. My drive was fueled partly by a genuine passion for the intricate complexities of global finance, but undeniably, a larger, more potent engine was a desperate, burning need to prove him wrong, to finally, unequivocally demonstrate my worth to the man who had always withheld his approval. Just last month, the culmination of years of tireless effort arrived. I received a major promotion to senior investment strategist, becoming the youngest person in the firm's venerable history to hold such a prestigious position. The accompanying salary bump was substantial, finally allowing me to purchase my dream apartment in a coveted Manhattan neighborhood, a beacon of independent success, with a comfortable amount of savings still left over. It was with a significant portion of those hard-earned savings that I decided to make what I genuinely believed would be the grandest, most impactful gesture of my life, purchasing a brand new Mercedes S-Class for my father as a Father's Day gift. In my carefully constructed fantasy, this luxurious car, a symbol of ultimate success and prestige, would finally, irrevocably make him see me not just as his daughter, but as a genuinely successful individual, as someone truly worthy of his elusive approval. The car, a sleek, gleaming black sedan with every premium feature imaginable, cost nearly a year's worth of my substantial salary. Yet, I rationalized the exorbitant expense, convincing myself it would be entirely worth it, if it meant I could finally, just once, hear those 4 simple words from him: "I am proud of you." Looking back now, with the painful clarity that comes only with profound emotional distance, I can see how utterly pathetic that desperate, lifelong need for validation truly was, how it had, insidiously, shaped nearly every major decision I had ever made. My hard-won achievements weren't truly for me, for my own intrinsic satisfaction or personal growth. They were, in essence, carefully honed weapons in an unwinnable, ceaseless war for his affection, for his recognition. When I bought that ridiculously expensive car, I wasn't merely purchasing a luxury vehicle. I was attempting, with a child's enduring hope, to buy the one thing every child deserves freely, unconditionally: a parent's unwavering, unconditional love. The annual Matthews family reunion always, without fail, coincided with the last weekend in June, conveniently close to Father's Day. This strategic timing meant that the gathering invariably doubled as a grand, almost ceremonial celebration of Richard Matthews' patriarchal status, his unchallenged reign as the family's undisputed titan. This year, I vowed, would be different. This year, my decision to finally, undeniably stand out, to make an indelible mark, rested squarely on the ridiculously expensive luxury car I had acquired, that sleek, obsidian black Mercedes S-Class, meticulously loaded with all the premium features my father had once, years ago, offhandedly mentioned admiring at a country club friend's sprawling estate. As the dreaded date on the calendar approached, my anxiety didn't just rise, it spiraled to dizzying, almost unbearable new heights. I spent 3 entire weekends, a testament to my obsessive desire for perfection, shopping for the perfect, outfit. I wanted something that unequivocally screamed, successful and sophisticated, but subtly whispered, not trying too hard. It had to be feminine. Yet absolutely not frivolous. That contradictory, almost impossible mix my father seemed to expect from any woman who dared to venture into the world of business. I finally settled on a navy blue, impeccably tailored designer dress, a classic silhouette from a designer my mother had once casually mentioned my father respected. I paired it with subtle, understated gold jewelry and elegant, expensive shoes that were tasteful rather than flashy. The familiar, almost ritualistic pattern of preparation, the agonizing attention to every minute detail, felt utterly pathetic even as I participated in it. It was the desperate, ingrained routine of a child, still tirelessly seeking an elusive approval at the advanced, supposed to be independent age of 32. Past reunions, a veritable parade of paternal disappointments, flashed through my mind as I meticulously packed my overnight bag. Each gathering was indelibly marked by some form of his cold, calculated criticism. I recalled being 16, brimming with youthful pride after winning the state math competition, only for him to immediately question why I wasn't focusing more on debate, coldly stating, "Numbers people are easy to find, Aliza. Critical thinkers are rarer." When I graduated college summa cum laude, a truly exceptional academic achievement, his sole, deflating comment was that my chosen field, finance, was unstable and ephemeral compared to the enduring solidity of real estate. My first substantial bonus at Goldman Sachs, a tangible representation of my burgeoning success, resulted in him wondering aloud if finance was really just glorified gambling, a house of cards. And my very first promotion, a testament to my hard work and talent, led to insidious questions about whether I'd merely been selected to fulfill some internal gender quota. Nothing, absolutely nothing, was ever allowed to stand as an achievement on its own merits. It was always tainted, always undermined by his caustic skepticism, his implicit doubt. But this particular year carried an additional, far more profound complication, one that had brutally rocked the very foundations of my identity just 3 short months earlier. Out of a simple, almost idle curiosity about my distant ancestry, I had used a popular genetic testing service. The results, when they arrived in my inbox, were not just unexpected, they were a seismic shock. The genetic markers, the very blueprint of my paternal lineage, simply did not align with those of Richard Matthews. After the initial, staggering wave of shock and disbelief, a cold, logical determination had set in. I quietly, methodically pursued a more definitive, medically sanctioned test. During a brief, tense visit home, feigning casualness, I managed to obtain DNA samples from my father's hairbrush, a mundane object now imbued with world-shattering significance. The results from that test were, tragically, conclusively irrefutable. They now sat, a sealed, weighty truth, in a discreet envelope tucked away deep in my purse, a literal nuclear option I hadn't yet fully decided whether, or when, to deploy. The discovery, once the initial emotional tsunami receded, explained so much of the inexplicable. It illuminated the lifelong, gnawing feeling of being an outsider in my own family, a perpetual anomaly. It rationalized the subtle, unacknowledged physical differences that set me apart from James and Sophia, the shape of my eyes, the curve of my smile, the tilt of my head. Most painfully, it accounted for the inexplicable, persistent coldness from a man who, despite his general emotional austerity, at least showed basic, rudimentary affection to his other biological children. The chilling realization settled upon me. I suspected he knew. He had always known. And that dark, unacknowledged knowledge, I now understood, had subtly, insidiously colored every single interaction we had ever shared, casting a pall over my entire existence. The day before the reunion, a Saturday, I drove the new Mercedes to my parents' sprawling suburban Boston home. I had carefully arranged for its discreet delivery to a nearby dealership. ensuring it would remain a surprise until my grand reveal. My presentation was meticulously planned. I arrived mid-afternoon, timing my entrance for when my mother would be at her garden club meeting, guaranteeing a private, undisturbed moment for this carefully considered peace offering. My father answered the door himself, looking, as always, impeccably crisp in his usual business casual attire, despite it being a leisurely weekend. He seemed mildly, almost imperceptibly annoyed by the interruption to his Saturday routine. "Aliza," he stated, his voice devoid of warmth. "You're early. The reunion isn't until tomorrow." He checked his expensive watch with an air of mild irritation, as if I had somehow missed a scheduled appointment rather than choosing to arrive early. "I know, Dad," I replied, my voice a carefully modulated blend of confidence and eagerness, even as my heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. "I actually brought your Father's Day gift early. I wanted to give it to you privately." My hand trembled almost imperceptibly as I extended a small, elegantly wrapped box towards him, the unmistakable Mercedes emblem clearly visible through the clear plastic window on top. He took the box with the polite, detached manner he reserved for obligatory gifts from distant acquaintances, his expression initially neutral. But as his fingers traced the familiar logo, his eyebrows lifted in genuine surprise, quickly followed by a flicker of suspicion. "Is this some kind of joke, Aliza?" he asked, his tone still guarded. Without waiting for a response, I gently guided him to the large front window, where the brand new, gleaming black Mercedes S-Class sat majestically in the circular driveway, its polished surface reflecting the afternoon sun. His face registered genuine shock, a rare sight, followed by something almost akin to pleasure, a fleeting, almost imperceptible softening of his perpetually rigid features. But it vanished just as quickly, replaced by his usual analytical, almost clinical expression. "This is excessive, Aliza," he stated, his gaze sweeping over the car, assessing it like a property investment rather than a heartfelt gift. "What are you trying to prove?" he asked, though he was already moving towards the front door, the keys now clutched tightly in his hand, a curious avarice in his movements. "Nothing," I lied, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "I received a big promotion last month, and I just wanted to do something special for you." He stepped outside, circling the car not once, but twice, examining every inch of it as if it were a potential acquisition. He noted the premium features, asked pointed, almost interrogative questions about its financing and insurance, questions that felt less like genuine gratitude and more like a forensic audit. After a brief, surprisingly swift test drive, during which he critically commented on the steering being a bit loose. Despite the S-Class's renowned handling capabilities, he bypassed the prominent driveway spot and instead parked the magnificent vehicle deep within the garage, out of sight. A deliberate act, I understood, with a fresh wave of disappointment, designed to keep it from the immediate gaze of arriving guests. His thanks were perfunctory, delivered as a mere formality, immediately followed by a dismissive comment that I must be doing remarkably well to waste money like this. With those few carefully chosen words, he effectively cut the legs out from under my grand, hopeful gesture, leaving it limping and exposed. That evening, back in the quiet, anonymous sanctuary of my hotel room, I called my best friend, Taylor, fighting back the hot, stinging tears that threatened to overwhelm me as I recounted the cold, utterly crushing reception. "You know what, Aliza?" Taylor's voice, a familiar balm of righteous anger, resonated through the phone, the tone of a friend who had heard too many similar stories, too many years of this same paternal pattern. "Forget him. Seriously, take the car back. He doesn't deserve it. Not a single inch of it." I dismissed the suggestion, though her words offered a fleeting, comforting glimmer of what true, unconditional support felt like. I was still clinging, with a child's stubborn, illogical hope, to the fragile belief that tomorrow, at the reunion, things would be different. That perhaps, in front of the assembled family and acquaintances, he might actually show some appreciation, might finally see me, acknowledge my independent existence and achievements. "Just promise me, Aliza, you won't show him that test," Taylor warned, her voice suddenly serious, laced with a genuine concern that cut through her previous anger. "Not unless you are absolutely, unequivocally prepared for nuclear fallout. Because that's what it will be," I promised, my voice a hollow whisper. But even as the words left my lips, the sealed envelope remained nestled in my purse. A secret weapon I both feared beyond measure and couldn't quite bring myself to relinquish. It was a ticking bomb, and I was holding the detonator. Sunday afternoon arrived, cloaked in perfect June weather, bright, glorious sunshine tempered by a gentle, caressing breeze, as if the very environment itself was conspiring to create the illusion of the ideal family gathering. A picture, perfect setting for a deeply flawed reality. I deliberately took the longer, scenic route to my parents' sprawling estate, using the solitary drive to mentally rehearse confident, composed responses to the inevitable, intrusive questions that would undoubtedly come my way, and queries about my personal life, my career trajectory, my bewildering lack of a husband or children at the ancient age of 32. My knuckles were white, rigid with tension, as I turned the steering wheel onto the familiar maple-lined driveway, already half filled with an impressive fleet of luxury cars belonging to extended family and, predictably, my father's carefully selected business associates, who somehow always made the invite list for these supposedly intimate family gatherings. My gaze immediately snagged on the Mercedes I'd gifted him, prominently displayed near the front entrance, rather than tucked away in its garage spot where he'd parked it yesterday. It was strategically positioned, a gleaming black monument, precisely where arriving guests couldn't possibly miss it. Taking a deep, fortifying breath, I smoothed the elegant fabric of my dress, checked my makeup one final time in the rearview mirror, and strode towards the imposing front door with the practiced, almost impenetrable confidence I had painstakingly developed in boardrooms filled with formidable men who had, consistently, underestimated me. My mother answered the door, her face lighting up with genuine warmth, a momentary flicker of her true self. She enveloped me in a soft embrace, whispering, "You look beautiful, darling." Her voice, however, held a familiar undercurrent of apprehension, and she quickly added her standard, almost ritualistic warning. "Your father's in the back garden with the Peterson group." Her words delivered with the practiced caution of someone issuing a weather advisory for an impending storm. The grand foyer was already bustling, a chaotic symphony of greetings and polite chatter. It was the usual mix, actual family members, a predictable assortment of aunts, uncles, and cousins, intermingled with my father's carefully curated collection of business connections, powerful individuals treated as honorary members of the esteemed Matthews clan. Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, a woman perpetually starved for gossip, approached immediately, showering me with air kisses and a rapid-fire volley of intrusive questions about my love life. Meanwhile, Uncle George, a bluff, hearty man, offered a crushing handshake and a booming, "There's our Wall Street wizard," a phrase I knew, with a certainty born of long experience, would irritate my father if it reached his keenly attuned ears. Cousins, second cousins, and long-standing family friends swirled around in predictable, well-worn patterns, the same conversations repeating annually with minor, forgettable updates. Everyone, it seemed, was performing their assigned roles in the intricate, perpetually running drama that was the Matthews family theater. My father's entrance was precisely as choreographed as I had anticipated, a performance he had perfected over decades. He emerged from the sunlit garden, flanked by 3 business associates, all of them laughing uproariously at something that was, Undoubtedly, only moderately amusing, but treated as hilariously brilliant due to the speaker's immense net worth. His eyes, sharp and assessing, swept the crowded room, acknowledging various guests with curt nods and brief, almost perfunctory greetings. His gaze finally, briefly, landed on me. The flicker of recognition in his eyes was immediately followed by the briefest tightening of his lips, a subtle contraction of muscle that spoke volumes. Then, he nodded precisely as he had to distant, barely remembered relatives, and continued his trajectory across the foyer, walking directly towards Mother, to murmur something in her ear. There was no particular greeting for me, his middle child, the daughter who had just gifted him an automobile worth more than most people's annual salaries. I pretended not to notice, my gaze fixed on my cousin Rachel as I engaged her in a seemingly engrossed conversation about her demanding medical residency. But the familiar, acrid sting of dismissal, a pain I had known since childhood, burned through me all the same, hot and undeniable. My mother materialized at my side moments later, her touch on my arm gentle, a silent apology for his coldness. "Darling," she began, her voice soft, "your father mentioned you brought a new car for him. How incredibly generous." Her eyes, however, communicated a complex mixture of gratitude for the gesture and a deep, underlying concern about the extravagance, the sheer cost of my desperate plea. "Please, come say hello to the Stevensons," she continued, skillfully changing the subject. "They just got back from a financial conference in Singapore and would love your insights." This, I understood, was Mother's way, always running interference, always creating subtle social buffers, always manufacturing plausible reasons for interactions that should, ideally, come naturally between family members. It was her quiet, desperate attempt to smooth over the rough edges of our dysfunctional reality. James, as was his custom, arrived fashionably late, making an entrance that commanded attention. He swept in with his perfect wife, Rebecca, a woman as flawlessly polished as he was, and their two perfectly behaved, impossibly photogenic children. He received the warm, demonstrative paternal embrace I had spent decades, a lifetime, futilely trying to earn. "Dad, the new car is insane," James exclaimed, his voice booming with admiration. "When did you decide to upgrade?" I watched, a growing disbelief coiling in my gut, as my father clapped James heartily on the shoulder, a gesture of genuine warmth he rarely bestowed upon me, and responded, "Sometimes you need to treat yourself, son." Success has its privileges. There was no mention, not a single word, of the car being a gift. No acknowledgement whatsoever of my contribution. It was a complete, deliberate erasure. Sophia, bless her empathetic heart, intercepted me before I could fully process this blatant, painful dismissal. She pulled me into a genuine, unhurried hug that lingered just long enough to communicate her silent understanding, her shared dismay. "I heard about your promotion, Liz," she whispered, her voice sincere, using my childhood nickname that no one else in the family ever used anymore, a term of endearment that felt like a secret language between us. "That's amazing. Seriously groundbreaking." Her sincerity was a much-needed balm on the raw wound of my father's indifference, but the stark contrast only served to highlight the profound disparity in how he treated us. As appetizers, delicate culinary miniatures circulated through the crowded foyer carried by hired staff, I noticed my father leading a group of his business associates towards the front drive, gesturing animatedly. Through the large bay windows, I could see him showing off the Mercedes, opening its sleek doors, pointing out its luxurious features, his face alive with a vivid, almost unrestrained pride, a pride I had never, not once, seen directed at me. "He's been doing that all morning?" Sophia murmured, appearing quietly at my elbow, a glass of crisp white wine in her hand, which I gratefully accepted. 3 separate tours for different groups of his cronies. "Mother told me you bought it for him." "That was incredibly generous, Liz." I took a long, Slow sip of the wine, the cool liquid doing little to extinguish the burning resentment within me, as I watched my father settle into the driver's seat, inviting one of his associates to experience the passenger side luxury. Generosity wasn't my motivation, I admitted quietly, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. Just once I wanted him to see me as successful, as worthy of notice. Pathetic, right? Sophia squeezed my arm, her touch firm and reassuring. Not pathetic, Liz, human. But Liz, you need to understand. She hesitated, her brow furrowed, carefully choosing her next words. Dad will never give you what you're looking for. It's not because you don't deserve it. It's because he isn't capable of it. Something in him is broken when it comes to you specifically. Her words landed with a surprising, almost physical force. Not because they were entirely new information. A part of me had always, instinctively, known this, but because hearing someone else, especially Sophia, acknowledge the peculiar, painful dynamic I'd experienced my entire life made it suddenly, agonizingly real in a way my private, unspoken thoughts never had. The phantom weight of the paternity test in my purse, previously a secret burden, seemed to double, the sealed envelope now a literal ticking bomb, a truth I both desperately wanted to detonate and, paradoxically, hoped to contain. The hour before dinner unfolded with the predictable, almost ritualistic rhythm of Matthews' family gatherings. Everyone gradually migrated to the formal living room, a space dominated by uncomfortable antique furniture and aggressively tasteful decor meticulously selected by my mother, but, of course, approved by my father, the only domestic domain, where his opinion reigned supreme and unquestioned. I strategically positioned myself on a window seat, slightly removed from the main conversation circle, an observer rather than a participant. I forced myself to sip a second glass of wine, the bitter taste mirroring my internal state, as I observed the familiar family dynamics with a newfound, almost chilling clarity. The knowledge of my genetic otherness, tucked away in my purse, granted me an almost anthropological detachment, allowing me to view the performance before me with analytical precision. James, predictably, commanded the center of attention, effortlessly holding court. He regaled the assembled family with captivating tales of his latest real estate acquisition, a struggling shopping complex he confidently planned to transform into a sprawling complex of luxury condominiums. The initial investment looked risky to my partners, he explained, puffing out his chest with feigned modesty. But I saw the potential everyone else missed. Our father, enthroned in his worn leather armchair, a king on his throne, nodded approvingly, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. That's the Matthews instinct, Father interjected proudly, his voice resonating with an almost reverent tone, seeing opportunity where others see failure. It's in the blood. The profound, searing irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. The phantom weight of the envelope in my purse seemed to grow heavier, more suffocating, with each blood-related claim, each pronouncement of inherited genius. Inevitably, as James concluded his self-congratulatory monologue, the conversation shifted almost imperceptibly in my direction. Aliza. Richard tells me you've moved up at your firm. My Uncle Robert remarked, his voice tinged with what sounded like genuine interest, a rare and startling sound in this room. Senior investment strategist, isn't it? Impressive for someone your age. Before I could even formulate a modest response, Father cleared his throat, a sharp attention, commanding sound. It's a good stepping stone position, he stated, dismissing my accomplishment with a casual wave of his hand. The financial sector is volatile, though always has been. Not like having something tangible like property. He then turned smoothly towards James, his gaze filled with a warmth he never directed at me. Real assets withstand market fluctuations, they persist through generations. The familiar, calculated dismissal stung, even though I had anticipated it. It was his usual, precisely timed pivot back to James, and the seemingly unassailable superiority of real estate, the implied inferiority of my chosen career path, an industry he clearly viewed as little more than glorified speculation. Actually, I began summoning the calm, authoritative professional voice I meticulously cultivated and employed in difficult client meetings. My division generated 30.8% returns last quarter, outperforming the market by 22 points during significant volatility. Our proprietary risk assessment model, which I personally developed, has been adopted company-wide. A moment of impressed, almost stunned silence followed, a rare victory. But it was fleeting. Father responded with another dismissive wave of his hand, his eyes glazing over. Numbers on paper, Aliza. When the next recession hits, we'll see how that holds up. He then turned abruptly to his business associate, Henry, his attention already completely shifted. Speaking of property values, Henry, what do you think of the zoning changes in the Cambridge corridor? The conversation moved on, as if my accomplishments were inconsequential, a mere ephemeral blip on his radar. I excused myself, needing to refresh my drink, to escape the suffocating air of the room for just a moment. In the hallway, I encountered Sophia, who was returning from checking on her husband, patiently watching the children in the backyard. "Don't let him get to you," she whispered, squeezing my arm, her eyes filled with a familiar empathy. "I heard about your model from Michael's cousin who works in finance. It's apparently revolutionary, Liz." Her quiet, unwavering validation warmed me, a soothing balm on my raw emotional wounds, even as I realized, with a fresh wave of self-disgust, how utterly pathetic it was that I still, at 32, so desperately craved such approval. As I approached the temporary bar setup in the dining room, a low, familiar voice drifted from my father's adjoining study. The door left carelessly ajar. It was his voice, the car. He was saying, a note of satisfaction in his tone. "Yes, quite an upgrade from the old model. When you work hard and build something from nothing, like I have, you earn these luxuries." The male voice responding belonged to Walter Peterson, my father's longtime business rival, sometimes ally, always an eager listener to Richard's self-congratulatory narratives. "Richard, you old dog, always the modest one." Peterson chuckled. "Your daughter Aliza mentioned. She bought it for you when we chatted earlier. Said something about her recent promotion. Sounds like she's making quite a name for herself in New York." A brief, almost imperceptible silence followed, punctuated only by the clinking of ice in glasses. Then, Father's voice, each word precisely chosen, deliberately crafted for maximum impact. "Yes, well, the girl has always been desperate for attention. Truth is, her so-called success comes directly from the opportunities I provided. Private schools, college connections, the fundamental understanding of business. I instilled in all my children from day one. The car is just her way of showing. She's finally applying what 5 taught her." The casual, almost breathtaking erasure of my accomplishments, the audacious rewriting of my hard-fought independence as somehow stemming solely from his influence, an influence that had, in reality, offered nothing but relentless criticism and doubt, sent a shockwave of anger through me so intense that I nearly dropped my glass. The conversation continued, Father elaborating on how he'd always pushed Aliza harder than the others, because she needed that extra discipline, painting himself as the benevolent, demanding architect of achievements he'd actively, systematically dismissed. My fury, initially hot and volatile, churned into a cold, clarifying rage. I retreated silently, my presence undiscovered, the burning in my gut solidifying into an unshakable resolve. In the main hallway, James intercepted me, his expression uncharacteristically serious, devoid of his usual polished charm. "Aliza, a word," he asked, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. He guided me towards a quiet corner near Mother's prized orchid display, a verdant sanctuary that felt utterly out of place amidst the brewing family storm. Dade mentioned you've been asking Mother strange questions about her college years. What exactly are you digging for? His directness, his sudden, pointed inquisition caught me completely off guard. In truth, after the initial shock of the DNA test, I had indeed casually, almost furtively, inquired about Mother's life before her marriage, subtly fishing for clues about possible relationships. But I had prided myself on the subtlety of my questions, believing them sufficiently vague to avoid suspicion. Just getting to know her better, James, I replied, my voice carefully modulated, betraying nothing of my internal turmoil. Women in her generation didn't get many opportunities to build their own identities before marriage and children. It's a fascinating history. James studied me with our father's analytical gaze, that uncanny family resemblance striking in ways that now, after the DNA revelation, felt like further, undeniable evidence of my fundamental exclusion. Look, Aliza, whatever you're doing, whatever point you're trying to make with extravagant gifts and probing questions, just stop, he commanded, his voice hardening. The family has a certain order, a harmony. Don't disrupt that with whatever crisis you're manufacturing. His condescension, the echo of Father's own dismissive tone, was so perfectly mimicked that I almost laughed, a bitter, hysterical sound that I barely managed to suppress. Harmony? I challenged, my voice cutting through his, a sharp blade against silk. Is that what you call this toxic hierarchy? This system where one person's accomplishments are celebrated, while another's are systematically undermined, dismissed, even erased. I stepped closer, my voice dropping, infused with an icy defiance. I'm not manufacturing anything, James. I'm just finally seeing clearly. He took another step closer, lowering his voice further, conscious of the mingling guests. Dade has built everything we have, Aliza. Everything. The Matthews name means something because of him. Your fancy job in New York, your trendy apartment, it all stems from the foundation he created. Show some respect and gratitude for once. Before I could formulate a biting retort, our cousin Rachel approached, her kind eyes seeming to sense the palpable tension between us. Everything okay over here? She asked gently. Aunt Caroline is looking for both of you. I think dinner is about to be announced. James immediately plastered on his practiced public smile, the perfect son persona slipping seamlessly back into place. Just catching up with my little sister, he said, the hesitation before sister, almost imperceptible, yet it stung. Business talk. Nothing important, as he walked away, his arm slung casually around Rachel's shoulder. She turned back and touched my arm gently. You know, she murmured, her voice quiet. My mom always says your father plays favorites like it's an Olympic sport he's determined to medal in. For what it's worth, Aliza, I think what you've accomplished entirely on your own is pretty incredible. Her quiet, unsolicited support nearly broke my carefully maintained composure. I'd spent so many years desperately convincing myself that the problem lay solely with my own perception, not with the brutal reality of our family dynamic. To have someone else, an objective observer, acknowledge that dynamic felt paradoxically both profoundly validating and utterly devastating, confirming the depth of my self-deception. The chime of the antique dinner bell echoed through the house, Mother's traditional signal for everyone to begin moving towards the formal dining room. I lingered behind, my fingers absently brushing the outline of the envelope in my purse, the test results a physical weight against my palm. I weighed my options, contemplated the consequences, considered every imaginable scenario. Part of me, the bruised and battered child within, yearned to leave immediately, to withdraw from this elaborate charade of family unity, to protect myself from the inevitable, fresh wounds the evening would undoubtedly inflict. But a stronger, perhaps more masochistic part of me, fueled by a newfound clarity and a lifetime of accumulated hurt, refused to retreat. I was determined to see this through, to finally, unequivocally confront the lifetime of rejection with the undeniable, physical evidence of its root cause. I checked the envelope one final time, confirming the test results remained safely sealed inside, a truth bomb awaiting its detonation. Then, I straightened my shoulders, inhaled deeply, and moved with a new resolve towards the opulent, intimidating dining room, steeling myself for the performance, my performance, that lay ahead. The Matthews formal dining room had always, to me, felt like a perfect, meticulously crafted metaphor for our family itself. Its imposing mahogany table, an antique relic that seated 20 people with stiff, unforgiving grandeur, somehow still managed to feel coldly impersonal, a stage rather than a gathering place. Ancestral portraits, their eyes seemingly following every movement, watched judgmentally from the richly wallpapered walls, silent arbiters of tradition and expectation. The elaborate place settings, each piece of gleaming silver and delicate crystal, arranged with almost scientific precision, clearly prioritized appearance and rigid formality over any semblance of comfort or genuine conviviality, much like everything else in my father's meticulously constructed world. Mother, in her unending quest for perfection, had truly outdone herself with the table arrangements. Crystal glasses caught and refracted the dazzling light from the massive chandelier overhead, scattering diamond-like patterns across the crisp white linen tablecloth. Fresh flower centerpieces, artfully arranged, were spaced with military precision, and each guest's predetermined position in the family hierarchy was clearly, undeniably assigned by name cards written in perfect, elegant calligraphy. I found my card predictably far down the table, relegated to a position between my cousin Rachel's husband, a pleasant but forgettable man I'd met perhaps twice in my life, and one of father's younger business associates, a man with a perpetually eager expression. I was safely, strategically distanced from any hope of meaningful conversation or direct engagement with the circle. James and his perfect family occupied the prime positions near father at the head of the table, their laughter and conversation reverberating with an air of effortless entitlement. Sophia and her husband were seated slightly closer, serving as polite, amiable buffers between the family's true inner sanctum and the lesser relations. Mother, as always, sat at the opposite end, her position a perfect, poignant illustration of her role in the family, technically equal in status, yet separated by the vast expanse of the table, connected by marriage, yet eternally distant in practice. The first course arrived with military precision, a silent, choreographed ballad of waitstaff. Delicate appetizers of seared scallops, adorned with vibrant microgreens, were placed before each guest simultaneously, as if by a single unseen hand. Father rose from his seat, his wine glass held aloft, commanding immediate, reverent silence without uttering a single word. His presence alone was enough. "Welcome, family and friends," he began, his voice resonant with practiced charm, his public persona polished to a glossy, impenetrable shine. "To our annual reunion." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle over the room. Each year, as I look around this table, I am reminded of how incredibly fortunate I am to have built not just a successful business, but a legacy, a dynasty, embodied by my family. His gaze swept proudly, possessively over James, who nodded appreciatively, a perfectly modulated expression of gratitude on his face. Then, his eyes moved to Sophia, who offered a demure, almost imperceptible smile. His gaze then slid past me, as if I occupied the same visual plane as the wallpaper, an invisible, inconsequential part of the tableau. "A special welcome to the Peterson Group joining us this year," he continued, acknowledging his business associates with a slight nod, a gesture that welcomed them into his carefully constructed circle of influence. When one is surrounded by success, one naturally attracts more of the same. His toast continued, seamlessly transitioning into a self-congratulatory ode to his family's achievements. He highlighted James's recent impressive business expansion, Sophia's commendable appointment to a prominent community board, and ended with a pointed, subtly delivered comment that family success truly comes from embracing proven pathways rather than unnecessarily challenging traditions. His eyes finally, briefly, landed on me, a fleeting, almost imperceptible moment of eye contact, but the meaning was unmistakable, its intended target crystal clear. As the elaborate meal progressed through 5 meticulously prepared courses, Father expertly directed the conversation with subtle cues, imperceptible glances, and direct, pointed questions. He ensured that topics remained firmly within his preferred domains. The ever-fluctuating real estate markets, local politics where he wielded considerable influence, and occasional sports discussions that inevitably, and predictably, highlighted James's former athletic achievements. When Mother, sensing a momentary lull in the conversation, gently attempted to mention my recent promotion, a rare and timid attempt to include me, Father smoothly intercepted. "Speaking of financial markets, Henry," he interjected, turning to his associate as if Mother hadn't spoken a word. "What's your take on the Fed's latest signals?" He effectively erased her effort, dismissing it with the practiced ease of a master manipulator, without ever acknowledging that it had even occurred. By the fish course, the familiar, soul-crushing pattern had fully emerged. Father periodically lobbed pointed questions in my direction, each one meticulously designed not to engage or acknowledge, but to subtly undermine, to expose a perceived weakness. "Aliza, your firm handles primarily domestic investments, correct? Limiting, isn't it, given the vast global expansion opportunities? Or, I understand your promotion came after the Davidson account. Fortunate timing that James was able to introduce you to William Davidson at last year's charity gala." Each comment was carefully constructed, every word chosen to reframe any success I had achieved as either limited in scope or, more insidiously, dependent on family connections I had actively, fiercely avoided using. I maintained the pleasant, professional demeanor I had perfected in hostile boardrooms, refusing to show the emotional reaction he seemed so determined to provoke. "Actually, Father," I would respond, my voice light, almost conversational. "Or international division, fully integrated my risk assessment model last quarter. And the Davidson account came through a blind pitch competition. No introductions necessary. My corrections were delivered with practiced lightness, each word a precise counter-punch. Though I noticed Sophia's sympathetic wince at each exchange, the familiar family dance playing out with agonizing, predictable pain. The main course arrived, an unnecessarily elaborate beef Wellington that demanded everyone's full attention for several blissful minutes, providing a brief, welcome respite from the conversational minefield. Father used the opportunity to open another bottle of prohibitively expensive wine, his consumption steadily increasing throughout the meal, a concerning pattern that Mother tracked with increasingly nervous, almost imperceptible glances. James leaned over to mutter something in Father's ear, receiving a dismissive wave in response, his words seemingly too trivial for the patriarch's attention. As coffee and dessert were served, Father's attention, now slightly blurred by alcohol, swung back in my direction, the minimal filters he typically maintained having visibly eroded. "Aliza, Richard tells me you're still single," commented Mrs. Peterson, her voice laced with what sounded like well-meaning interest. "Such a beautiful, accomplished young woman, the men in New York must be intimidated." Before I could formulate a polite, rehearsed response about prioritizing career advancement, Father interjected, his voice heavy with a manufactured concern that thinly veiled his true intent. "Aliza has always been focused on proving something, rather than building something," he said, swirling his bourbon contemplatively, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond me. "Some people chase accomplishments to fill other voids. Family, Aliza, requires compromise. something that Matthews women have traditionally understood better than she has. The casual cruelty landed with practiced precision, implying that my professional success was merely a pathetic compensation for personal failure, rather than an achievement in its own right. Mother's sharp intake of breath was audible, even from my distant table position. "Richard," she began, her voice infused with an uncharacteristic, almost defiant firmness. But he continued as if she hadn't spoken, completely ignoring her interjection. Perhaps if Aliza had shown more interest in the suitable matches I introduced over the years, rather than dismissing them as boring or conventional, she wouldn't be facing her 30s alone. Each word, meticulously selected for maximum impact, was a public dissection of my personal choices, artfully presented as paternal concern rather than the hostile, deeply personal critique it truly was. The familiar, suffocating pressure built behind my eyes, the childhood urge to flee from the table, warring fiercely against my adult determination to maintain my dignity. I took a measured sip of water, noting with a strange, almost clinical detachment that my hand remained perfectly steady despite the violent emotional turbulence churning beneath my composed exterior. "I appreciate your concern for my personal fulfillment, Father," I responded evenly, drawing upon every negotiation technique I had ever learned in my cutthroat industry. "But as you've often emphasized, Matthews focus on results, and my results speak for themselves." A tense, suffocating silence fell over the table. Relatives who had witnessed countless similar exchanges over the years suddenly became intensely, almost morbidly interested in their dessert plates, their eyes studiously avoiding mine. Father's business associates shifted uncomfortably, suddenly fascinated by the intricate architectural details of the ceiling. The pressure in my chest expanded with each rapid heartbeat, the cumulative weight of a lifetime of these moments, these public humiliations thinly disguised as family concern, these careful, systematic erasures of my personhood and achievements. The envelope in my purse seemed to pulse with a low, potent hum of potential energy, a nuclear option I had promised Taylor I wouldn't deploy. As waitstaff, moving with a palpable sense of unease, began clearing dessert plates, a blinding, perfect clarity descended upon me. I realized, with an undeniable certainty, that the current path was utterly unsustainable. Continuing to endlessly seek approval from a man who was, it now seemed, genetically programmed to withhold it, was a self-destructive act I could no longer afford, an emotional bankruptcy I refused to declare. As coffee cups were being refilled and brandy offered to conclude the elaborate, emotionally draining meal, Father pushed his chair back slightly, a signal universally understood by the gathered family, as preparation for one of his impromptu, self-aggrandizing speeches, a tradition that had, over years of Matthews' gatherings, evolved into a dreaded, inevitable ritual. The anticipatory silence fell immediately, absolute and suffocating. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Silverware was carefully, almost reverently placed down, and all attention reflexively turned towards the patriarch, the undisputed center of this carefully constructed universe. Father stood, brandy snifter clutched firmly in hand, his expression transforming into the benevolent, almost condescending authority he reserved exclusively for these moments of public performance. Before we dispersed to the garden for our annual family photograph, he began, his voice carrying that particular, resonant timbre of someone utterly accustomed to commanding rooms, to being implicitly obeyed. "I'd like to take a moment to express my profound pride in what the Matthews family continues to build together." He gestured expansively, a sweeping motion that, tellingly, included his business associates as honorary members of this supposed dynasty, this empire built on his name. "A family is much like a business, an enterprise," he continued, his gaze sweeping the table in that practiced, superficial way, appearing to make eye contact with everyone while actually connecting with no one. "It requires vision, unwavering leadership, and participants who truly understand their roles in creating collective success. As I look around this table, he declared, his voice swelling with self-importance, I am reminded of how fortunate I am to have children who contribute to the family legacy in meaningful, substantial ways. He turned towards James, raising his glass slightly, a silent, knowing salute. James, your business acumen continues to impress not just me, but the entire Boston development community. The Riverside Project represents exactly the kind of bold, forward-thinking approach that distinguishes Matthews projects from lesser ventures. You've not only embraced the lessons I've taught you, but you've elevated them, taken them to new heights. James nodded with practiced humility, a slight, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips, barely concealing his profound satisfaction. The golden child was receiving his expected, well-deserved due. Father then shifted his attention towards Sophia, his expression softening, warming further, a genuine affection in his eyes. And Sophia, your grace in balancing demanding family responsibilities with your tireless community leadership shows remarkable maturity, a true depth of character. Your invaluable work with the Children's Hospital Board has brought genuine prestige to the Matthews name, reminding us all that true success includes giving back to the community that supports us. Your mother and I couldn't be prouder of the family you're raising and the values you represent. Sophia's smile was genuine, a little uncomfortable with the public spotlight, as she was always more at ease facilitating others' recognition than receiving her own. I braced myself, my muscles tensing, for what would inevitably come next, the careful omission, the pointed, pregnant silence where my name should have been, the practiced technique of praise by exclusion that would communicate volumes to everyone present without requiring a single explicit criticism. What happened instead was somehow infinitely worse. Father's gaze finally, deliberately landed on me. The slight, almost imperceptible narrowing of his eyes betrayed the calculated, premeditated nature of what was about to follow. As I reflect on my children's accomplishments, he continued, his voice modulating to what others might mistake for thoughtful contemplation. Rather than the prelude to an attack it actually signaled, I'm struck by how differently success can be defined. He paused, a deliberate, theatrical pause that allowed the already suffocating tension in the room to build to an almost unbearable crescendo. I took a measured sip of my brandy, the liquid burning a path down my constricted throat. I'm proud of all my children, he announced, raising his glass higher, and for a suspended, ridiculous moment, a desperate, childish flutter of hope ignited within my chest. It was quickly, brutally extinguished by his continuation. Except for the loser sitting at the table. The words landed with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, exquisitely cruel, followed by a beat of stunned, shocked silence. Then, uncertain, nervous laughter rippled through the guests, most of them assuming this must be some inside family joke, some peculiar, private banter, rather than the public, calculated evisceration it truly was. I felt blood rush violently to my face, then drain away completely, leaving behind a cold, detached numbness. Every eye at the table, it seemed, turned simultaneously towards me, their expressions ranging from mortified embarrassment to undisguised pity to morbid, hungry curiosity. Father continued, utterly unfazed, as if he'd merely made a mild joke about the weather. Some people, he declared, his voice imbued with a false gravitas, measure success by titles and salaries, by superficial achievements that look impressive on paper, but ultimately lack true substance and staying power. True success, lasting success, comes from continuing family traditions, from building upon foundations, rather than constantly seeking to prove individual worth at the expense of collective strength and harmony. The deliberate vagueness of some people fooled absolutely no one. The target of his remarks was crystalline in its clarity, as obvious as the chandelier hanging above us. Mother's face had gone completely white, her knuckles bloodless as she clutched her napkin, while James looked smugly, almost obscenely satisfied, a faint smile playing on his lips. Sophia, in stark contrast, was openly, visibly mortified, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and sympathy. Then, Rachel, across her husband, reached out and gently touched my arm in silent support, a gesture of profound kindness, but I barely registered it. My entire consciousness, my very being, had narrowed to a painful, pinpoint focus on the man at the head of the table who had just, unequivocally, confirmed what the DNA test had already told me, that I was fundamentally separate, irrevocably other, not truly part of this family in his eyes. For 20 seconds that stretched and warped like hours, I remained utterly frozen, a statue carved from humiliation. I experienced the raw, physical sensations of it with an almost clinical detachment. The burning flush in my face, the sudden constriction of my throat, the accelerated, frantic pounding of my heartbeat, the primal fight or flight response flooding my entire system with a jolt of adrenaline. A lifetime of similar moments, a relentless slideshow of public corrections, subtle undermining, hard-won achievements systematically reframed as failures, each one building upon the last. Like carefully placed bricks in a suffocating wall, flashed through my consciousness. The summative message, hammered home with relentless precision, was always the same: I was fundamentally insufficient, inherently unworthy of the name I carried, the name that genetic science had recently, ironically, confirmed wasn't actually mine to claim. As father concluded his speech with some platitude about family unity that rang utterly hollow after his pointed, public exclusion of me, something shifted irrevocably within me, a final, crucial thread, brittle with years of strain, severed between the desperate child, still clinging to the futile hope of earning approval, and the emerging adult woman, who suddenly saw with perfect, blinding clarity the utter futility of that lifelong, exhausting quest. The physical weight of the sealed envelope in my purse, previously a burden, a shameful secret, transformed, in that precise moment, into a profound, exhilarating liberation. Its contents were no longer something to be hidden, they were a key, unlocking the prison of false expectations I'd occupied my entire life. The room remained suspended in uncomfortable, suffocating tension, every eye fixed on me, waiting for my reaction. They were perhaps expecting tears, a dramatic, hasty exit, the predictable, tearful conclusion to the familiar family drama that had played out countless times in previous years. Instead, a strange, profound calm descended upon me, a serene clarity of purpose crystallizing around a decision that, I now realized, had perhaps been inevitable from the very moment those test results arrived. Without fully planning the action, my body moved as if guided by an unseen force. I found myself standing, the movement so smooth, so deliberate, that it commanded immediate, absolute attention. Conversations halted mid-sentence, silverware clattered faintly as it was put down, and all eyes, without exception, turned towards me. Their expressions ranged from bewildered curiosity to growing apprehension, the latter primarily from those who had witnessed previous Matthews family confrontations and recognized the ominous shift in the atmosphere. My champagne glass remained on the table, deliberately not raised, its symbolism unmistakable, a silent refusal to participate in his ritual, to toast his false legacy. I smoothed my dress with steady, unyielding hands, surprising even myself with the absolute, unshakable calm that had replaced the earlier turmoil. It was as if I had passed through a violent storm and emerged, miraculously, into its peaceful, silent eye. "Thank you, Father," I began, my voice carrying clearly across the table, without effort, without a tremor. The professional tone I'd perfected in boardrooms, a voice designed to project authority and composure, served me remarkably well in this most unexpected of moments. Thank you for that illuminating speech. I allowed a beat of silence to emphasize the irony. I've spent 32 years of my life trying to earn an approval that was never going to be granted, relentlessly measuring myself against standards that mysteriously shifted and disappeared whenever I approached meeting them. Today, I finally understand why. The room had gone completely, utterly still, the kind of weighted silence that precedes truly significant, world-altering moments. Mother's face was a mask of stark alarm, her eyes wide with dawning horror, while Father's expression darkened, a chilling mask of cold fury spreading over his features as he recognized, with dawning fury, that this script was not, by any means, following his expected pattern. For those keeping score, I continued, my voice imbued with a deliberate lightness that belied the monumental magnitude of what was coming. I graduated top of my class from Cornell, built a successful career without family connections or any form of nepotism, and recently became the youngest senior investment strategist in my firm's history. By most objective measures, I am hardly the definition of a loser. I allowed my gaze to sweep slowly across the table, establishing brief, meaningful eye contact with several relatives who, to my surprise, nodded slightly in acknowledgement, a quiet, unspoken validation of my words. Then, I returned my attention, with laser focus, to Father. But success, in Richard Matthews' world, has never truly been about objective achievement, has it? It's about rigid conformity to your specific vision, about reflecting glory back upon you, rather than creating one's own light, one's own path. I reached for my purse with deliberate, unhurried calm, acutely aware that every single movement was being closely observed, every gesture scrutinized. The unusual spectacle of the previously compliant middle child finally, spectacularly, breaking rank was simply too compelling to ignore. I bought you a car worth more than most people make in a year, I said directly to Father, whose face had now settled into the cold, impenetrable mask he wore during business negotiations that were not proceeding to his advantage, a terrifying blankness. Not because you needed it, or even particularly deserved it, but because I still harbored the childish, desperate hope that a grand enough gesture, an extravagant enough gift, might finally bridge whatever mysterious, inexplicable gap has existed between us my entire life. From my purse, with measured, unhurried movements, I slowly withdrew the sealed, off, white envelope containing the paternity test results. The paper, in that momentous instant, seemed almost mundane, deceptively innocuous, considering the seismic weight of the information it contained. I held it up for all to see, a silent, damning testament to a truth long buried. For 3 decades, I've blamed myself for your inability to show me the same affection, the same warmth, the same pride you so readily showed James and Sophia. I continued, my voice steady, though a raw, aching vulnerability resonated beneath the composure. I've twisted myself into countless, impossible shapes, trying desperately to become whatever version of myself would finally earn your approval, never truly understanding that the problem wasn't in my actions, or my worth, or my efforts. The problem, Father, was in my DNA. A collective, audible intake of breath circled the table as the profound, shattering implication of my words registered across the room. Mother's face, already pale, drained of any remaining color, turning a ghostly white. James, previously smug, straightened with a sudden, shocked alertness, his eyes wide with disbelief. I placed the envelope precisely in the very center of the imposing mahogany table, my movements deliberate, each one a statement of finality. For you, Dad, I said, my voice quiet, almost tender, yet infused with all the irony and bitter finality the moment so richly deserved. Happy Father's Day. Without waiting for a single response, without sparing another glance at the stunned, silent faces, I turned and walked slowly, deliberately from the dining room. My back was straight, my pace unhurried, preserving every last shred of the dignity that had been systematically stripped from me throughout the endless, Agonizing evening. The shocked silence held, stretched taut like a violin string, until I reached the grand foyer. Then it shattered, dissolving into the immediate eruption of multiple, overlapping conversations, questions, exclamations, all blending into an unintelligible, chaotic noise. I continued outside without hesitation, not once looking back. The evening air was cool, a blessed relief against my flushed, burning skin. The path to the driveway was illuminated by decorative lanterns, their soft glow creating pools of light in the gathering dusk, guiding me towards my escape. The Mercedes, a gleaming black testament to my misplaced hopes, sat exactly where Father had positioned it earlier for maximum visibility, its polished paintwork reflecting the house lights, a silent, mocking symbol of everything I'd been trying to purchase with money that should, with hindsight, have been invested solely in my own peace, my own future. The decision to take it wasn't conscious so much as a sudden, undeniable inevitability. My hand, as if guided by an unseen force, found the spare key fob I'd kept in my purse. The remote unlock responded with a gentle, almost inappropriately cheerful chirp that seemed wildly out of sync with the gravity of the moment. I slid into the driver's seat, the luxurious leather interior still carrying the faint, intoxicating new car smell, mixed with the barely perceptible trace of my father's cologne, an olfactory reminder of his brief, undeserved possession that I knew, with certainty, would soon fade. Through the windshield, I could see figures appearing at the dining room windows, distorted silhouettes gesturing animatedly, their mouths open in silent screams. The family drama, long suppressed, was now fully unleashed by my departure and revelation. The engine purred to life with expensive precision, a low, powerful rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. The dashboard illuminated with a welcoming array of lights, as if nothing momentous had occurred, as if this were simply another drive rather than a definitive, irrevocable break with 32 years of emotional servitude. As I reversed slowly down the maple-lined driveway, I caught a fleeting glimpse of the heavy front door flying open. Father's figure was framed in the warm glow of the interior light, one hand clutching what appeared to be the opened envelope, its contents now laid bare. His mouth was open in what might have been my name, a primal shout of rage or despair, but it was lost, swallowed beneath the gentle, sophisticated rumble of the German, engineered engine. The symmetry of the moment struck me with a sudden, profound clarity as I accelerated away, gathering speed. The luxury car he had so proudly showcased to his associates, while simultaneously minimizing and erasing my contribution, was now physically removed from his possession. This mirrored, in a perfect narrative balance, his own decades, long attempt to minimize and erase my very existence from his world. Both acts of erasure, finally, met their equal. The realization solidified what had, moments before, been intuitive action into a conscious, empowered decision. The reclamation of the physical gift paralleled, precisely, the profound reclamation of self, worth I was simultaneously undertaking. I was unburdened, finally, by the expectations of gratitude that had never, not once, been forthcoming from him. In the rearview mirror, the grand Matthews estate receded, growing smaller and smaller with each passing second, its imposing grandeur diminishing with the increasing distance. Just as its suffocating emotional hold on me weakened with each rotation of the wheels carrying me away. The lightness spreading through my chest wasn't happiness, not exactly. It was far too complex, too bittersweet, too intricately woven with years of pain for such a simple label. Rather, it was the unfamiliar, exhilarating sensation of true freedom, of choices suddenly unconstrained by the relentless, gravitational pull of paternal approval that had distorted my orbit for as long as I could remember. The Mercedes responded with quiet, almost effortless precision as I navigated away from the neighborhood of my childhood, each turn creating further, undeniable distance between the person I had been 30 minutes ago and the person I was, irrevocably, becoming now. I made it almost to the highway entrance, before the first call came through on my cell phone. Sophia's name flashed on the dashboard display, a beacon of concern amidst the digital chaos. Rapidly, it was followed by calls from James, then Mother, and then a flurry of calls from several cousins, the digital equivalent of the explosion I had detonated before walking away. I silenced the ringer, the insistent vibration a visceral reminder of the turmoil, but I didn't turn the phone off completely. Some part of me, a morbid curiosity perhaps, needed to witness the fallout, even if I wasn't ready to engage with it directly. As I merged onto the highway, heading not back to New York but towards Boston proper, towards an unknown future, I allowed myself a single, final glance in the rearview mirror. Just then, a male figure, undeniably my father, rushed into the street behind me, his normally composed, imperious face contorted in an expression I had never, not once, seen before. It was something beyond mere anger and raw, guttural emotion that veered into territory I couldn't immediately identify. The distance was too great to hear his voice, but I didn't need audio to recognize the silent scream from his body language alone, arms raised overhead in a gesture of such primal, unadulterated emotion that it momentarily rendered him utterly unrecognizable as the controlled, manipulative patriarch who had engineered decades of emotional torment. The image burned itself into my memory as I accelerated away, a searing visual representation of the seismic shift that had just occurred, the carefully constructed family narrative, finally cracked beyond repair by 3 pages of scientific data and 1 moment of absolute, unwavering clarity. By the time I checked into a downtown Boston hotel, a mere 30 minutes after my dramatic exit, my phone displayed a dizzying 17 missed calls and 29 text messages, the digital equivalent of the explosion I had detonated before walking away. I placed the room key on the sleek, anonymous desk, kicked off my heels, and finally allowed myself the space to review the communications, starting with Sophia's texts, which progressed rapidly from initial confusions. What just happened? What was in that envelope? To escalating concern? Liz, please call me! Everyone's freaking out. To fragmented information. Dad saying things. Mom locked herself in her room. James is threatening legal action about the car. Mother's voice messages began composed, laced with a fragile politeness, but rapidly deteriorated with each subsequent message. The first was a gentle, almost tentative, "Aliza, please call home when you get a chance." Her 5th message, however, was laced with raw, cracking emotion. "The test, it can't be right. There must be some mistake. Please come back so we can discuss this as a family." James, predictably, had limited himself to 2 terse texts, both laced with thinly veiled threats of legal action if I didn't return Dad's property immediately and retract your disgusting accusations. The stark contrast between my siblings' responses was utterly unsurprising. Their reactions perfectly aligned with the deeply ingrained roles they had always played in our complex family dynamic. Sophia, the empathetic truth seeker, James, the loyal, protective son of the patriarchy. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, phone still clutched in hand, the physical and emotional distance from the reunion already allowing me to process the tumultuous events with a surprising, almost clinical clarity. The paternity test had merely confirmed what some deep, intuitive, almost primal part of me had perhaps always known, that Richard Matthews was not, in fact, my biological father. And with that confirmation came the chilling realization that the inexplicable emotional distance he had maintained throughout my entire life stemmed from a secret knowledge he had carried, unspoken and unacknowledged, for decades. I had obtained the test on an impulse, a sudden, inexplicable urge, after casually discovering through a recreational genetic testing service that my supposed paternal genetic markers simply didn't align with any known family connections. The initial shock had swiftly given way to a strange, almost liberating sense of explanation, providing a reason for the lifetime of felt otherness within my own family. Now that the information was public, the carefully maintained family image, that meticulously constructed facade, was disintegrating in real time. Decades of pretense collapsing under the immutable weight of scientific fact. The most revealing response came nearly 2 hours later, after I had showered, washed away the lingering residue of the evening, and changed into comfortable clothes from the overnight bag I had presciently packed in case the reunion became utterly unbearable, a preparation that now seemed chillingly prophetic. My phone rang, Sophia's number flashing on the display, and something deep within me needed to hear at least one family member's voice to confirm that the emotional earthquake I triggered had actually occurred in the external world and not just within the confines of my own consciousness. Liz. Sophia's voice was hushed, barely a whisper, suggesting she was calling from somewhere private, perhaps a hidden closet or a quiet corner of the still, bustling house, filled with lingering extended family. "Are you okay? Where are you?" The genuine, unvarnished concern in her tone nearly undid my hard won composure, the fragile shield I'd constructed around my emotions. "I'm safe," I answered noncommittally, my voice a little rougher than I intended. "What's happening there?" She exhaled heavily, a long, weary sigh. "Chaos. Complete meltdown. After you left, Dad," he opened the envelope at the table, in front of everyone. He read it for like 30 seconds, just staring at it, and then he started shouting for Mom. She took one look at it and went completely white. They disappeared into his study for maybe 10 minutes, while everyone just sat there in shocked, horrified silence. And then Dad came storming out, "Looking for you." He saw the car was gone and just lost it completely. I've never seen him like that, Liz. Never. The clinical, almost detached description of the events helped me maintain my emotional distance, allowing me to treat the situation almost like a dramatic business case study rather than the implosion of my actual life. "And Mother?" I asked, dreading the answer, but needing to know. "She's locked herself in their bedroom," Sophia replied, her voice still hushed. "Won't talk to anyone, not even James." The guests all left pretty quickly after that, as you can imagine. Dad's been making frantic phone calls in his study for the last hour. And James is talking about some kind of injunction about the car, which honestly seems like the least important issue right now. She paused, lowering her voice even further, her question a whisper. "Luz, is it true? The test results, are they real?" The question carried no judgment, only a genuine, almost childlike desire to understand, so characteristic of Sophia's mediating, empathetic nature. "Yes," I confirmed simply, the word feeling oddly light on my tongue, despite its immense weight. "I had it done after a genetic service flagged inconsistencies. Richard Matthews is not my biological father." Saying the words aloud to a family member, hearing them spoken into the silence of the hotel room, made them suddenly viscerally real in a way that privately knowing hadn't. "Do you know who is?" she asked softly. "The test doesn't identify that, only confirms the negative match with the sample I provided from Father's hairbrush." I explained, resorting to technical details, which were far easier to discuss than the raw, complex emotional implications. But given the timing and Mother's reaction, I'm guessing it was someone from before she married Father. Sophia was quiet for a moment, absorbing the information, before asking the question that truly revealed the depth of her understanding, her usual emotional intelligence shining through. "How long do you think he's known?" The question cut directly to the heart of everything, laying bare the central, agonizing betrayal. It wasn't merely the biological truth that wounded, it was the decades of emotional punishment, the relentless withholding of affection, for a circumstance utterly beyond my control, his entire life with me. I answered with a certainty that surprised even myself. It explains everything, Sophia. Every single criticism. Every comparison, every impossible standard he set. He wasn't trying to make me better. He was punishing me for existing. The painful, undeniable truth of this assessment settled between us, neither of us needing to articulate the countless examples from our shared past that supported it. I need to go, Sophia said suddenly, her voice snapping back to the present. James is coming upstairs, and I don't want him to know we're talking. Just please, text me that you're safe, wherever you are. And Liz. Her voice softened, growing almost imperceptibly. Whatever happens next, I love you exactly the same. This changes nothing between us. Her words, an unexpected, unconditional affirmation, lodged themselves deep in my chest, a warm, comforting presence that finally cracked the protective numbness I'd maintained since leaving the house. After hanging up, I moved slowly towards the hotel window, overlooking the shimmering expanse of Boston Harbor. The city lights, a vibrant tapestry against the dark water, reflected back at me, the view simultaneously familiar and strangely alien, much like my own reflection in the glass. Somewhere in that vast, bustling city was the man who had, paradoxically, shaped my entire childhood through a calculated, deliberate absence of affection. And somewhere else, perhaps in that very same city, was the unknown man whose genetic material I carried, the biological father whose existence had been a secret for so long. The profound symmetry of these two fathers, one physically present but emotionally absent, a constant source of pain. The other completely unknown but biologically connected, a sudden, surprising source of understanding, created a strange, unexpected sense of balance. It was as if the universe had finally provided a coherent explanation for the perpetual sense of misalignment, the feeling of being fundamentally out of sync, that I'd carried throughout my entire life. As midnight approached, a final, unexpected text arrived, its source mother's private number, rarely used for direct, personal communication, reserved mostly for emergencies or discreet arrangements. I never meant for you to find out this way. It read, the words appearing stark against the bright screen. It wasn't an affair. There was someone before your father in college. Thomas Keller. When I discovered I was pregnant, your father offered to marry me anyway, to give you his name. Please believe he tried to love you as his own. Some men simply cannot separate their feelings from biology. I failed you both by pretending the truth didn't matter. Can we meet tomorrow? Just us. There's so much you deserve to know. The message confirmed what I had already intuitively grasped, but it added intricate layers of complexity I hadn't considered, casting my father simultaneously as both villain and, tragically, a victim of his own profound limitations. And my mother, too, was revealed as both a deceiver, one who had maintained a powerful secret, and a trapped young woman making impossible choices, in an era far less forgiving than our own. I placed the phone on the nightstand without responding, the emotional exhaustion finally overtaking the last vestiges of adrenaline that had carried me through the evening. Tomorrow would require difficult decisions about how much truth I truly wanted, how much connection I could salvage, or indeed, was even worth salvaging, and what shape my life would now take, given that the central, all-consuming organizing principle of earning paternal approval had been definitively, irrevocably removed. For tonight, I allowed myself the luxurious surrender of emotional shutdown, of dreamless, untroubled sleep, a profound rest untainted by the lifetime of questioning that had so painfully preceded this sudden day of answers. The week following what my mind had, for simplicity, categorized as the revelation, unfolded with a strange, almost disorienting dual quality, moving simultaneously excruciatingly slowly and dizzyingly fast. Each day brought a fresh deluge of new information that simultaneously clarified and complicated my understanding of my place in the world, like shards of glass falling into place to form an intricate, unsettling mosaic. The very next morning, after my dramatic exit from the Matthews estate, I met my mother at a small, discreet cafe far removed from any family haunts, a neutral territory chosen for its anonymity. Her appearance shocked me with its raw vulnerability. The meticulously maintained Matthews matriarch facade was completely absent, replaced by a woman who looked both older and, paradoxically, more authentically human than I had ever seen her. His name was Thomas Keller. She began without preamble once our steaming coffees had arrived, her fingers trembling slightly around the delicate porcelain cup. One met junior year at Wellesley. He was at MIT, studying engineering. Brilliant. Kind completely wrong for a girl from my background, according to my parents. Her eyes, usually so guarded, were now wide with a fragile honesty. When they discovered our relationship, they forbade it immediately. 2 months later, I met your father at a charity function, the appropriate match everyone approved of. The story unfolded with the poignant, almost cinematic clarity of a period film's, a young woman pressured by societal expectations and familial demands to abandon a genuine, heartfelt connection for social advancement, only to discover her pregnancy, after the relationship had been forcibly, brutally ended. Richard Matthews, my supposed father, had then offered marriage, driven partly by what mother insisted was a genuine affection for her, but undeniable. Also by a calculated assessment of how Caroline's influential family connections would significantly benefit his burgeoning business ambitions. A promise to raise you as his own. Mother explained, her eyes unfocused, gazing into some middle distance where the past still vividly lived, a silent reel playing only for her. And I truly believe he intended to keep that promise. But from the very moment you were born, Aliza, you had Thomas's eyes, his expressions, his way of questioning everything rather than simply accepting what you were told. Richard tried, in his own way, to love you. But every time he looked at you, he saw another man's child. You were the physical, undeniable proof of my life before him, a constant, living reminder of a past he couldn't control. The revelations continued over 3 painstaking hours, details of a hidden history I had never once suspected, unfolding with painful, agonizing clarity, meticulously explaining the complex, damaging family dynamic that had shaped my entire existence. My biological father, Thomas Keller, had never known about me. He had moved to California after graduation, built a successful engineering firm, married, and had 3 children who were, technically, my half-siblings living an entirely separate, unsuspecting life. Richard, mother revealed, had tracked his life from afar, through alumni newsletters, and, in more recent years, through social media, a strange, possessive surveillance. But she had never contacted Thomas, honoring the promise made to Richard that the past would remain buried, that I would be a Matthews in name, if not in blood. By our 3rd coffee, the atmosphere, though still fragile, had shifted slightly, allowing us to progress to the most difficult, most painful question that had gnawed at me for decades. Why didn't you ever protect me? I asked, the accumulated hurt of 30, 2 years compressing into this single, potent query. You saw how he treated me compared to James and Sophia. You watched him systematically undermine every single achievement, every desperate attempt to earn his approval. How could you let that continue for 30 years? Her face crumpled, twisting with a grief so raw, so palpable, that it momentarily overrode my lingering anger, a wave of profound sorrow washing over her. I failed you, Aliza, she acknowledged, her voice hoarse, offering no excuses, no justifications, just a stark, agonizing admission. Each time I considered telling you the truth, revealing why he couldn't give you what you deserved, the moment seemed wrong. The potential damage, the potential fallout, seemed too great. Time passed and the lie simply grew larger, more monstrous, harder to correct. I told myself you were strong, resilient, that you were building a life independent of his approval. I didn't realize, Not until yesterday. How much that desperate pursuit still drove you, how deeply it still shaped your choices. The conversation ended without any neat resolution. No comforting, tied-up bows, only the tentative, fragile beginning of a more honest, more authentic relationship that would undoubtedly require years to patiently rebuild on a foundation of newly discovered truth. The following day brought another seismic shift, a surprising crack in the emotional landscape, when I received an email from Thomas Keller, my biological father. It was a response to a message I'd sent him, a carefully worded email outlining my discovery, after confirming his identity through public records. His reply was cautious, understandably so, but imbued with an undeniable kindness. He expressed profound shock at learning of my existence, requested time to process this monumental information, but also conveyed a genuine, heartfelt interest in connecting once he had fully absorbed the reality of a daughter he'd never known existed. "I see from your email signature that you work in finance in New York," he wrote in his initial response, a simple observation that felt remarkably potent. "Ironically, I'll be in Manhattan next month for a conference. Perhaps we could meet for coffee, if you feel comfortable doing so." The simple, unadorned acknowledgement of my professional identity, offered without qualification or comparison, operated like a powerful balm on my raw, exposed emotional wounds. The neutral respect of his tone suggested possibilities for connection untainted by the complex, traumatic Matthews history. It felt like a clean slate, a genuine invitation. While these profound personal earthquakes reshuffled my entire understanding of family and self, the professional world, with its pragmatic indifference to existential crisis, continued to turn. My boss called midweek, her voice brisk and normal, with questions about a pressing client presentation. The sheer normalcy of work discussions provided a surprising, unexpected comfort amidst the personal chaos that threatened to consume me. "The Richardson account needs your risk assessment model explained in person, Aliza," she informed me, her tone conveying respect and confidence. "They're specifically requesting you by name. Your reputation is truly growing." This simple, unequivocal acknowledgement of my professional value, entirely independent of any family connections or historical context, reinforced what should have been obvious all along, that my worth existed completely separate from the Matthews name or their approval, anchored instead in abilities, intelligence, and character entirely my own. Richard, predictably, made his first direct contact 6 days after the reunion, not personally, but through his attorney. It was a coldly formal letter, filled with legalistic jargon, demanding the immediate return of the Mercedes and threatening legal action regarding defamatory statements made in public regarding paternity. The chilling contrast between this rigid, legalistic response and Thomas Keller's cautious, but profoundly human email crystallized everything I needed to know about both men. Genetics, I realized with startling clarity, suddenly seemed far less relevant than character in determining true parentage. I immediately instructed my own attorney to arrange for the return of the vehicle, while making it absolutely clear that DNA evidence was, by definition, not defamatory. James maintained complete radio silence, his unwavering loyalty to father unsurprising, given their genuine biological connection and their shared, unshakable worldview. Sophia, however, called daily, a constant, comforting presence. Our relationship, already strong, deepened profoundly through honest, vulnerable conversations about the family dynamics we'd both observed and experienced, but had never previously discussed openly. Truly acknowledging the insidious patterns. "He's been controlling the narrative our entire lives," she observed during one late night call, her voice quiet but firm, making us compete for approval that was never equally available. "I benefited from that system, Liz, but I always saw how it hurt you. I'm so sorry I didn't stand up for you more." Her heartfelt acknowledgement, Her validation of my lived experience from someone who had witnessed it firsthand helped to heal wounds I hadn't realized still festered, still bled. It was, oddly, more powerful and more healing than any scientific test result could ever be. 6 months after the revelation, the entire landscape of my life had transformed in ways both subtle and profound, a mosaic of new connections and self-discoveries. Weekly therapy sessions became a crucial lifeline, helping me patiently untangle the complex, suffocating web of conditional love and performance anxiety that had relentlessly driven my achievements for decades. This arduous process allowed me, finally, to recognize genuine accomplishment for its intrinsic value, entirely separate from the desperate, consuming need for external approval. My relationship with Mother evolved into something far more authentic, far more resonant. Her careful, lifelong performance of perfection was gradually abandoned in favor of honest, sometimes painfully raw conversations about choices, consequences, and the complex, messy love that had always existed beneath the polished surface of the Matthews family theater. I met Thomas Keller, my biological father, for the very first time at a quiet, unassuming restaurant near Central Park. It was a strange, almost surreal experience, seeing my own expressions, my subtle mannerisms, mirrored uncannily in a man I had never met. It was both unsettling and, strangely, profoundly comforting. "You have my mother's analytical mind," he observed with a gentle smile over dessert, hours into a conversation that flowed with surprising ease, as if we had known each other for years. But that spark, when you talk about market patterns, that's apparently from my side. Our relationship developed cautiously, respectfully, both of us mindful of its unusual, unexpected beginning. Neither of us expected immediate father-daughter closeness, but we began to painstakingly build a genuine connection through shared intelligence, common intellectual interests, and the surprising discovery of genetic commonalities that explained lifelong traits I had never seen reflected in the Matthews family. The final, essential piece of this transformed life mosaic fell into place at Thanksgiving. I accepted Sophia's heartfelt invitation to dinner at her home, choosing it over the traditional, obligatory gathering at our parents' sprawling estate. Richard, predictably, declined to attend when informed of my presence, his continued rejection now producing more pity than sharp, searing pain. His limitations, his inability to change, became increasingly apparent, almost painfully obvious, as my own healing journey progressed. "He can't change, Liz," Sophia explained gently, her children's laughter echoing from the next room, where they played with her husband. "Not won't. He genuinely can't. His entire identity, his very sense of self, is built around certainties that your existence, your truth, fundamentally challenges." Her observation carried no judgment, simply a quiet recognition of the immovable, sad reality we had both finally accepted. After dinner, Mother called, her voice stronger, more authentic than I remembered from my childhood. The performative perfection, the carefully constructed facade, had been replaced by a genuine, heartfelt engagement. "I'm proud of you, Aliza," she said simply, her voice clear and resonant. "Not for your job, or your address, or anything you've achieved. Though those things are indeed remarkable. I'm proud of who you are. Your resilience. Your capacity to build truth from deception. Your unwavering strength." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "I should have said that every single day of your life." The words I'd sought from Richard for 3 agonizing decades, freely given, unexpectedly bestowed by the parent who had always, in her own flawed way, loved me, landed with a profound, healing force, precisely because they came without conditions, without qualifications, without demands. As I ended the call, looking out at the soft glow of the city, I realized the most profound truth of the 6-month journey. That family, true family, transcended mere genetics and legal definitions, comprising instead those who saw you clearly, who loved you unconditionally anyway. who honored your authentic self, rather than demanding a performance of assigned roles. The luxury car I'd purchased as a desperate offering to a father figure who could never truly accept me had been reclaimed and subsequently, with a surprising sense of liberation, sold. The funds were wisely invested in my future, in my own peace, rather than squandered on a futile quest for illusory approval. More importantly, I had reclaimed the vast reservoir of emotional energy, previously exhausted on an unwinnable quest for validation. I was redirecting it now, consciously, towards relationships that nourished rather than depleted, towards work undertaken for genuine passion, rather than as a desperate proof of worth, towards building a life measured by internal fulfillment, rather than external recognition. The journey from that fateful, explosive family dinner to this new equilibrium hadn't been linear or simple. Each day had brought fresh challenges and occasional, painful setbacks. But the trajectory, I realized, remained consistently and undeniably towards healing, rather than further damage. Perhaps the most meaningful measure of growth came not from grand, dramatic revelations, but from quiet Tuesday mornings when I awoke without immediately assessing my worthiness, when accomplishments were celebrated for their intrinsic value, rather than their potential to finally, belatedly earn paternal approval, when life was lived from an authentic, solid foundation, rather than from a place of performative desperation. As this Thanksgiving evening ended, enveloped in the warmth of chosen family, I realized that while the mystery of my paternity had indeed been solved, the more significant discovery was that its ultimate importance had diminished with each step towards self-acceptance. The question of whose blood I carried mattered far less than whose values I chose to embody, whose love I accepted as genuine, whose truth I finally, unequivocally claimed as my own. Have you ever discovered that your true family isn't always defined by blood? Sometimes, the people who should love us unconditionally are, paradoxically, the ones who hurt us most deeply. I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below about how you've created your own chosen family, how you've navigated similar challenges, or how you've stood up to those who couldn't, or wouldn't, see your inherent worth. If my story resonated with you, even in a small way, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and self-discovery, and share this with someone who might need to be reminded that their value doesn't depend on anyone else's validation. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes taking back your power means walking away from people who never deserved it in the first place.